Okay, so you guys sent us this article from NBC News, and wow, uh, this one's about immigration raids and how they surprised a lot of people in New York City. And let me tell you, this thing's got layers like an onion. We're going to really dissect it and figure out like what actually happened, why it's a big deal, and all the big questions that come up because of it.
Yeah, let's break it all down.
Yeah. Okay. So this article basically it talks about these raids and how they seem to just come out of nowhere. Like people had no idea they were coming,
Right.
you know? And what really stood out to me is that this all went down in New York City. I mean, this is a place that most people think of as a sanctuary city.
Right.
And, we even highlighted this quote from a woman named Maria Sanchez, who's in the article. She talks about this fear. Like she's constantly living in fear and she's scared to even like go outside.
Right.
Is this like a normal reaction to stuff like this? Do we usually see this kind of impact on people?
Oh, it's definitely complicated. That whole sanctuary city thing, it isn't like a straightforward legal term.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's more like a way cities decide to deal with things. Like
Right.
they try to limit how much they work with the feds when it comes to immigration enforcement.
Okay.
So some cities might not use their resources to detain people who are undocumented, or they might not share information with federal agencies. But like the actual specifics, they can change depending on the city.
So if a sanctuary city isn't an official legal thing, is it kind of like that friend that tells you that they'll hide you from the cops, but then freaks out when someone rings the doorbell?
That's a pretty good way to put it, actually. I mean, the whole point is that it creates this feeling of safety that may or may not be real. And then when something like these raids happens, it just shatters that perceived safety net. And then you end up with the anxiety that Maria was talking about. Her story reminds me of accounts from way back, like during Operation Wetback in the 1950s.
Oh, wow.
But that was obviously a totally different time and situation.
Yeah. Do these raids in New York mean that there's like a bigger shift happening with immigration enforcement across the country? Or is this just a one-off thing?
Right.
Because I'm thinking about stuff like DACA and all the talk about the border wall.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like it's all kind of connected somehow.
You're totally on point with that. Like, we
Yeah.
can't look at these raids without thinking about everything else that's going on. I mean, in the past few years, U.S. immigration policy has been like a pendulum swinging back and forth.
Yeah.
So on one hand, you've got programs like DACA trying to give people a legal way to stay in the U.S.
Right.
But then on the other hand, there's this big push for tougher border control and more enforcement within the country. And these NYC raids, well, they could be seen as part of that tougher approach, especially in a city that's been very open about being a sanctuary city.
So then what are they trying to do here? Is it about stopping undocumented immigration? Or are they trying to make some kind of political statement? Or is it something else entirely?
It's probably a little bit of everything. From a practical standpoint, they might say, hey, we're just doing our jobs, enforcing the law, and responding to people's worries about safety. But when these raids happened and where they happened, especially in a city that's known for its immigrant population and for being a sanctuary city, well, it makes you wonder if there's a deeper message they're trying to send. Like, is this really just about enforcing the law, or is it about sending a signal about how the current administration feels about immigration?
Okay, so from like a legal point of view, can they even do that? Can they just raid a city that's basically said we're doing things our own way?
That's where things get tricky. Legally speaking, federal law usually wins out over local laws.
Okay.
So while cities can decide how to use their local resources, they can't actually stop the federal government from doing what they want to do. And this whole thing has caused a lot of legal fights all over the country, with states and cities pushing back against what they see as the feds trying to overstep their boundaries. And now this situation in New York City is adding another layer to this whole back and forth.
All right, so to kind of sum things up, we've got these surprise raids that happened in a city that considers itself a sanctuary city. Residents like Maria are living with this constant fear, and this is all happening while immigration policy is changing all the time. It's definitely not a simple situation.
Definitely not. And it really makes you think, with everything we've just talked about, what do you think the future holds for immigration policy, especially in cities like New York?
That's the big question, isn't it? This deep dive has given us all a lot to think about. And to our listener out there, thanks for bringing this to our attention. You've given us all some serious food for thought. So keep those questions coming,
You keep them coming.
and we'll keep diving deep.